Blackmagic Design just announced DaVinci Resolve 21, and there's a ton of cool new features, but in this video, I don't want to talk about all the new color tools, AI features, and all of that. I want to cover the top 10 changes made to the Fusion page. Let's get into it. Also, I'm going to be making some more dedicated videos on this update over the next couple of days, so leave a comment with what you want to learn all about. In no particular order, the first new feature is spell check in text nodes. As you can see right here, if I click on this node, whip animate, it says is spelled wrong. And of course, this one is spelled right, so what you can do is right click in the text box. You can use like the suggested words that it thinks I'm trying to say, or you can press ignore to add that to your dictionary. In that same menu, if I have something that is typed wrong, I can right click, come down to manage ignored words, and in this menu, I can delete options that I've added, I can add new ones, and for some reason right now it's showing 2 of some of them. I don't know why, but it ends up working out okay. But this feature is awesome and even works if you select multiple text nodes at the same time. It'll show you all of them that are spelled wrong. This new version also has a custom font browser, so if I just come over to the font and press this pop-out button, we can see all of the fonts that I have loaded into my system. I can go over to favorites if I, star a couple of these so that way they all show up just in a short list. And over on the 3 dots on the right, I can do a custom user text and then do something like this update is awesome. So that way I can see whatever I'm trying to type in the font that I might want to use. Next up is the multi-node select using the combine selected tools button. This basically lets you select several nodes in Fusion, usually the same type of node, and adjust the same setting between all of them at the same time. So in the case of these text nodes, normally what would happen if you select 2 nodes, you see both of them in the inspector. But now we have this new button right up here in the inspector, and when I press this, what it's going to do is say 2 tools selected and show me all of the controls. So the text box is like zeroed out because we have 2 different pieces of text between those. Let me view this a little bit better. We have the first one on the left and the second one on the right. But if we come down to something like the size and move this, you can see it's going to update in both of these nodes. Now moving over to the layout tab, something cool is you can actually grab the on-screen controls to offset these values, separately. And if I, click away and select these again, back on the layout tab, you can see these are going to be zeroed out because there's a difference in those values. And if I drag this back and forth, what it's going to do instead is just add or subtract from those controls. So that means we can keep them offset from each other, but still move both of them together. In that box, you can see the plus or minus. If we just select the text node and then, bring the size up here and then select both of these, what you'll notice as I move this back and forth is this is now a multiply sign. And that's because it's trying to keep the relative distance between them when it's using a slider control, and when using a point control, it's trying to keep the offset the same. Now, if you want, you can hold down Alt and that'll switch the mode that it's using. So now it's going to be using plus and minus, and then if we go over to the layout tab and hold down Alt, it's going to be multiplying these 2 values. That's all really cool, but there's some really awesome right-click menu options here that make aligning stuff extremely easy. The first one I want to take a look at is if we right-click on the center, we can come down to Set X Values, and then we can use any of these options. Now in this case, the X value is the same between those, so let's go to Set Y Values, and then just set it to be the first. So what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that the Y value is the same between the first node that we selected and all of the other nodes that we have selected. Going back to the text, we can do the same thing on the size control. If we right click, we can come down to Set Values to, and maybe we'll do the maximum. So that way they're all the size of the biggest node that we have selected. So when I do that, you can see whip animate is going to match the size of whip zoom. Now I'm going to set both of these controls back to their default option, and then down here I have 5 different text nodes. And I want to show how you can use this to easily align all of these into something like a list. What you want to do is make sure that you set the top position where you want it to show up, as well as the bottom item on the list. So we'll bring this down. And then the last thing we need to do is just make sure that Fusion can figure out what order all of these have to be in. So for text 2, we'll bring this up, and then we'll grab text 4 and bring this down. We don't have to worry about the exact spacing between these as long as it's in between item 3 and 5, so that way Fusion can figure out what order it needs to be in. So now if I select all of these nodes, come over to the layout tab, and then right click on the center X and Y, under the Set Y Values, we can use Spread. And again, what that's going to do, it's going to keep the top one in the same position, it's going to keep the bottom one in the same position, but it's going to spread all of the ones out in the middle, so that way we have perfect spacing. Really cool. And now that we have that, we can shift the Y value back and forth. We could come over to the text tab and shrink the size down. And when I shrink the size down, you can see the padding between these is bigger. If we come to the layout tab and move this back and forth, we can't shrink those together. That's where that Alt trick comes in. If I hold down Alt, now what it's going to do is multiply those and change them relative to each other. So we can bring this down to compress that padding, and then just use the Y value again, not holding Alt, to shift that back up to the center. Now, one of the other options in that right-click menu is something called jitter. So let's go to the text, and again, set the first one to be the maximum size that we want, and then we're just going to leave number 5 as the minimum size that we want. And for this one, it doesn't matter like if it's option 1 and 5, like I could go in here and set 3 to be the minimum size that we want. So the only thing that matters here is the maximum value and the minimum value. And if I select all of these, right click on the size, come down to set values to, we have a jitter option. It's going to pick a random value between the maximum and the minimum, and then set that to all of the size controls, so we just have something different. So that's pretty cool, but doesn't really look good for a list. So let's look at the last one that we have. Right click on the size, come down to set values to, and we can use middle, so that way it gets an average of all of these, and that way they're the same size. We might want to shrink this down just a little bit more. But I think the biggest change are the new Krokodove tools integrated directly into DaVinci Resolve. Now, these aren't new tools themselves. Krokodove is a free set of over 100 Fusion motion graphics, 3D, and visual effects plugins that you could previously get from Reactor. The difference now is that they're built into the program, and as a result, much more people are going to use them. You can find these in Fusion by coming up to Effects, and then we have the Krokodove tools, and there's just a ton of them in here. I'm still working through all of these, trying to figure out what they do, how to use them, and I'll probably make a top 5 or top 10 video here in the next couple days or next few weeks. So let me know which nodes you want me to look at in the comments down below. Real quick, one of my favorite nodes just to start is the Rasterize, which gives it like a cool halftone effect and just a ton of customization to change, what this does. A big one for motion designers, Fusion can now import .af files from Affinity Photo, just like it's been doing with Photoshop files since the update sometime last year. If you take your Affinity Photo project and just save it as a .af project file, you can drag that into Fusion and it's going to load in as a media in node. And by default, it's going to show the merge view, which has all of your layers, but in the inspector under the layer menu, you can select any of the individual layers inside of Affinity Photo. So in this case, I made some groups and labeled them so I could grab the climber, which is going to be the front cliff, as well as the climber. And this allows you just to separate all of these into different media in nodes, and you can create animations right inside of Fusion using your Affinity file designs. If you didn't know, Affinity is now a free program, so you can build a motion graphic inside of that program and then bring it into Fusion for all the animation and those effects. So this is basically our free version of the Illustrator and After Effects integration, and hopefully is going to provide some competition for them. This next one's a bit more niche, but still a cool addition, and that's a global Fusion variable. Basically, you can program a variable once and use it throughout all of your projects. The best use case I found for this so far is calculating the aspect ratio. Now, something I run into all the time inside of Fusion is when I want to make a square with a rectangle node, because this is based on the project resolution, so setting the width and height to be the same value is going to create a shape that matches our frame. The way that I normally fix that is by right-clicking on the height, coming down to expression, and then connecting this to the width. And now I can multiply this by the resolution. So I could do multiplied by 1920 divided by 1080, or I could simplify it and do multiplied by 16 divided by 9. When I do that, no matter what I set the width to, it's going to make a perfect square. The issue with this is if I come to the project settings and then use a vertical resolution, that's going to mess it up since the aspect ratio is no longer 16 divided by 9. So we can use a global variable to account for this and just make the process a lot easier. On my website and link down below, I have an expression cheat sheet that just has a ton of different Fusion expressions, and down at the bottom there's a link to my course, which does teach a lot about Fusion expressions, as well as just the fundamentals of Fusion in general. So if you want to learn Fusion, if you've been wanting to, this is a great way to start. Again, link down below. But up here at the top, we have the aspect ratio calculations, which they actually reference the project resolution. So you use this expression to get the width, this expression to get the height, and then they divide against each other to get the aspect ratio. So right here we have width divided by height, which I already have loaded in as a custom variable. So I'm going to grab the height divided by width and make that into a new one. Up at the top, we want to grab Fusion, come down to Fusion settings, and then we have the variables map. So right here, you can see I have aspect ratio already saved that has the width divided by the height, and you can click on that to edit the name, you can edit the value or delete it, but we want to press new, and we're going to call this one aspect ratio 2, and then we're going to paste in that value that I copied from my website. And when I press save, that's going to save it as a global variable that we can access in any project. Now, instead of doing 16 divided by 9, what I'm going to do is start with a percentage sign and then use a curly opening bracket. And now inside of these brackets, I'm just going to add in a closing one right away. We just need to type the name of that variable. So I'm just going to do aspect ratio to get the width divided by the height. And when I press enter, we're still going to have that square. It's going to do the calculation no problem. And when I go to settings and then set this to be a vertical resolution, what it's going to do is update that so we still have a square. I'm sure there's a lot of other cool stuff that we'll be able to do with this, but that's the first example that I thought of. Something that people have been asking for years is a new macro editor, and they finally updated it. Inside of Fusion, it's still a good idea to follow the rule of selecting these in the order that you want it to appear. You don't have to do that anymore, it just makes it easier to follow once you actually get into the macro editor. So for this example, I'm just going to select the text node, the rectangle in the background to keep this simple, and then hold down Shift and select all of the other nodes. Now I just need to right click, come up to macro, and then do create macro, and this is the new macro editor, which does look very similar to the old one. So off on the left, what we want to do is select the controls in the order that we want them to show up in the inspector. So for the text, I'm going to go through and select all of these different controls. And as I do this, you can see we're getting a preview of them off on the right. Now over on the right, if we added these in the wrong order, we can just click on these and drag them around to reorder how they actually show up inside of the inspector. And down at the bottom, we have stuff like separator controls, which is just a dividing line. We have a spacer, which is a gap. And then we also have a nest, which allows us to create those drop-down menus. So I'm going to drag the nest up to the top. And where this is still quite annoying is, sometimes that red line doesn't show up, so I can't actually place it in the right spot. And if you want to put something into a nest, you have to drag each control into the nest. And again, if that red line isn't showing up or giving you problems, it's a little bit annoying to do. If you want to rename what a nest says, all the way down at the bottom here, you can see it adds in that new nest control, and then we can use this, just rename it to text, and that'll update so we can name what those drop-down menus are. So for the box, I might do width, height, and corner radius, then add in a separator control so we have that divider, and then I'll go down to the background and then grab the color, just the top left red, green, blue, and alpha. And again, I'll probably want to use a drop-down menu here, so I'll add in a nest. And one thing that's annoying, every time I press these buttons or add in a control, it opens all of the nests. Which is really annoying after a while. But I'm going to bring all of these controls and put them down into this nest. Another thing that we can do is add in a custom page, so we could add in a new one and then drag controls to that. In this case, we just want it on the one page. And then you can also come to File and choose a thumbnail for the preview image on the edit page. Now, I don't have a thumbnail ready for this, but what it does is it'll load it into a little preview here, and then it'll save that to the edit page for you. So we want to come into the name and give this some sort of name. We're just going to call it Profile V2, and then again, going to File, we can save this directly to one of the folders. So in this case, I want to save it to the edit page under the titles category. Once that's done, we can just close it, and sometimes you have to restart DaVinci Resolve for it to show up. After restarting, up in the effects tab, I'm just going to search for Profile. You can see I can find Profile V2, drag this down, it has the title, and then it also has the group saved with all of the controls that we added. As you can see, this new macro editor still has a ways to go before it's actually nice to use. In the meantime, I recommend using something like MacroLab, which is a free web-based app that I did a video on a couple of weeks ago, or checking out something like Patrick Sterling's Macro Machine. But it's cool to see progress here, and hopefully they'll make it better in the future. Something I didn't expect to see was OGraf and Lottie animation support. No clue if I'm saying that first one right, but sorry if it's wrong. Basically, it's a file format that's used all the time on the web for animated vector graphics stored in a .json file. Version 21 added a OGraf loader node inside of Fusion, so if you drag one of these files into the Fusion node graph, and if we view it, you can see this animation is showing up inside of the Fusion node graph. Now, in my experience, this does not play back that well. Once it caches, it's fine, but it's quite slow the first time you play it, even on a really good machine. And that's just weird considering this is supposed to be a real-time web-based format that just plays back in browsers. Again, we're in beta, it's probably going to be improved upon in the future, but let me know how you might use this in a workflow. Again, this next one is something that people have been asking for a really long time, and that's audio-based animations from the Fusion page. Inside of Fusion, you'll right-click on a control, come down to Modify With, and then find the new Fairlight Animator. So with this, it shows up in the modifiers tab, and we need to come to the media pool, find our audio file, and then just drag this and drop it right in the clip name. Now under the analysis, there's like a demo one, or we just want to keep it on level, and when I press play, it's going to start reacting to that audio. Now one of the big issues with that is you can't hear the audio inside of Fusion. If we come over to the edit page, what you'd want to do is come to the media pool and drag this down and make sure that the audio starts right when the Fusion clip starts. So that way when you play it, you can actually hear the audio. But switching back to the Fusion page, you can't hear that. The workaround for that is to add in a media in node, set the media source to be background, and then if you view this off to the side, you'll be able to hear the audio inside of Fusion. So hopefully they make it easier to do that. But right now, this is a very limited tool. We only have a control for changing the scale, like how much it actually sizes up, as well as the offset where it starts changing the size. And then under the time, we can change, how fast it's reading the audio file and where it starts in that audio file. We have nothing to customize which frequency it's using or any of those settings that I would think is pretty essential to an audio animator. Something to keep in mind is that Fusion isn't a public beta. Blackmagic is still working on some of these features, and historically they'll refine them over the public beta and add new functionality. Hopefully that means adding a way to hear the audio better, as well as adding in some more controls to change which part of the audio we're actually using. But this last one is huge and probably one of the most requested features for this next update that I've seen, and that is going to be keyframes on the Fusion page. So if I press play, you see we have something animated just in a text plus node, and if we come up to the keyframes panel, you can see those keyframes right from the edit page. What I like to do is use the 3 dots to do display parameters just with keyframes, and then we could switch over to the curve editor to come in here and actually add in some sort of easing. Now I still don't like the keyframes editor on the edit page compared to Fusion, but now we can animate most controls from the edit page without having to jump into the spline editor. The unfortunate thing with this is that point controls don't work right now, like the center position in the text. If I add a keyframe to the center position and then move this up, you can see it's going to recognize that center control is animated and I can jump between the keyframes, but I can't add in the spline view to actually change its easing. And if we go back to just the keyframes panel, we can see those keyframes, but we can't move them around. I think this is because behind the scenes, the center control is actually using a modifier. It's using a path modifier, which animates a displacement control. And for some reason, the edit page keyframes panel just can't see this, and that means you still have to jump into Fusion to animate point controls. If I had to pick one thing for them to fix in the public beta, it would be this, because in my opinion, this feature is kind of useless if you can't animate everything from the edit page. Now, if you're like me and don't like using keyframes to rebuild the same animations over and over and over again, you might want to check out my editor collection and editor titles packs. It's what I use to edit these videos to add in the zooms, the titles, animate my camera into the corner, and animate screenshots and logos into place. All of it is powered by my Animengine framework, which gives you full control over the animations without using any keyframes, and all of it is done right from the edit page. It saves me hours editing each one of my tutorials and can save you that time as well. Check it out at the link down below and save 15% by getting the editor bundle. So a lot of cool stuff in this update, a lot of features that people have been asking for a while. It's a cool direction that they're going, but there is a lot of stuff that they didn't add that I've been wanting to see since probably version 18 or before. While they didn't add all that stuff, I'm excited to see what they've done and excited to see what they're going to do in the future. Let me know which new features you want me to dive into and make dedicated videos about, and check out the link down below to see all of the new Fusion features and their patch notes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.